Power up. Welcome to Energypreneurs, where I bring to you the exciting new opportunities in solar power, battery, and electric cars. I'm your host, Sohail Hasni. I have been tracking and analyzing these technologies on LinkedIn and Twitter for more than 10 years. Now we meet on podcast. Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Charging is very important, right?
Absolutely.
So maybe before we go in, you introduce yourself and we have the conversation going, no?
Sure. So my name is Johan Karlsson. I'm a Swede based in Melbourne, Australia. I've lived in Australia for the last sort of 15 years or so. I went to university, and then since then I've pretty much sort of been in the sort of new energy space, if you want to call it that, for that period of time. I've had a bit of a sort of a mixed background. I'm probably a bit of a generalist, but I've worked in sort of the energy retail space on sort of product development, so mainly around solar PV, energy storage, a little bit on EV charging in that space. So I worked for Momentum Energy and DC Power Co., which is sort of more on the clean energy sort of side. I've also worked a little bit in sort of developing solar projects as well, in both sort of in utility scale space, but also in the sort of commercial space, mainly in sort of analytical or quantitative kind of roles in that area. And then I've also worked a little bit in consulting in the past as well. So worked with Accenture Strategy and sort of a utility kind of advisory space, and in particular sort of helping electricity networks adopt to, I guess, sort of this new world that we find ourselves in of decentralized energy, and energy coming from a lot of different sources compared to back in the day. So I think sort of with that sort of background, I've sort of seen a lot of really interesting observations, a lot of failures along the way, and whether that's in companies that I've been involved with myself, and I think from failure you can certainly get a lot of lessons learned as well, and so we sort of then during the sort of COVID period got together with a few friends. I had a really sort of a bit of an urge to do something and get our hands dirty and finally sort of start our own business. So we got together and started this thing called State of Charge, which is sort of like a consulting company, but we sort of focus on essentially on market entry and product development in this sort of new energy space. Because we've found that a lot of times when companies try to get into a new country or onto a new continent, perhaps they've had a successful product or service in the US market or in Europe or in Asia. It's then quite often that, okay, let's throw a bit of money to go after Australia. It's an interesting place, high disposable income, that kind of thing. But it's actually really easy to waste your money whilst going into a new country, unless you do some of that background work first, really understanding the market, understanding how your product fits, and perhaps how the customer might look at your product, whether it's a consumer product or something that's adopted by energy companies. So that's sort of a bit of a background as to for me and State of Charge to get us started.
Okay, good. I mean, and also very great to talk to a fellow Melbourneian. I mean, I grew up professionally in the State Electricity Commission of Victoria, which during Jeff Kennett time, broken up, privatized. I used to work for the regulator. So then, it's a very interesting area. Now, right now, because of the election and also all the commitments on electric vehicles made by both parties, it must be a very exciting time, no, to be in this space.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very exciting time. I think what we have lacked until recently has sort of been more of a consistent approach to how do we welcome electric vehicles and electric vehicle manufacturers to Australian shores. There's sort of been a bit of a sort of you've had a state here come with an upfront incentive, another state with an upfront incentive, and perhaps a road user tax But we've started to get most of the states sort of going in a similar direction in terms of supporting EVs, which is good. Although I do think we're sort of still lacking a bit of that cohesiveness across Australia. From my point of view, Australia really should have a fuel emissions standard to really encourage manufacturers to adhere to at least sort of a minimum baseline across their portfolio of vehicles, because at the moment we for the foreseeable future we will end up getting a lot of vehicles that emit far too much, whether it's carbon or other particles in the air that shouldn't be the case. So I think I think our emissions standard is something like is about twice that of the US, which just means that as
a lot of things get in that should not be, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's not great. It sort of just means that if you have a factory somewhere around the world pumping out a particular model vehicle, and let's say that it's now becoming they're not allowed to send it over to the US anymore because maybe it doesn't make sense for their emission standards. They're just going to keep sending it to places where there's no standards, and we're going to end up with a lot of old clunkers here. Perhaps at the same time as we're starting to get a bit of pace in the electric vehicle space. So it's a bit of from my point of view, at the moment, it's a bit of a double-edged kind of sword, this opportunity. There are a lot of great things happening in the EV space, and we're super excited to do a lot of work there. But I think to accelerate it to sort of the level of, say New Zealand, which is just around the corner, where uptake is something like 4 times as high as Australia, we really do need to have a more consistent sort of national approach, I think, to that.
Yeah, I mean, New Zealand at one point, I mean, I'm not following, their standards, especially for second-hand cars, was quite modest relative to Australia. So all of those that might have changed also, no?
Yeah, I mean, they were particularly, they actually made it very easy for example, Japanese cars, second-hand cars, to come into the Australian market, which was to the New Zealand market, which was great. They've had a really good national approach to electric vehicle charging over there, which I think Australia is starting to get as well. But then they have put in this sort of fuel emissions standards to make it really clear to manufacturers all over the world that, hey, we take this seriously. You do need to have a consistent approach to how you bring vehicles here. We're not going to stand the really high emitting cars anymore. That's going to have to start coming down with time. And I think those are the kind of the signals that the OEMs need all over the world before they start taking a place like Australia or New Zealand more seriously and start allocating cars here. Yeah.
Now, what's the vision of State of Charge? You mentioned that you do a bit of consultancy as well, and plus supporting policy. So what are you exactly trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, we're in an essence, and this is probably a shared mission of quite a few companies, is to accelerate the energy transition. In our case, we think we can do that by actually increasing competition in the markets that we operate in. So Australia in particular, how can we encourage some of the best and most innovative companies in the world, which is often in the US, often in Europe, or in leading markets in Asia. How do we encourage those companies to come here? How do we make it less risky to enter Australia as a market? So how do we give them, it could be that we provide, purely, for example, say market intelligence on, here's what's happening in the EV charging space, for example. Here's the different, here's the typical way to go to market. Here's your main competitors that have perhaps released hardware or software solutions here. And it's to give them a really clear picture of what's happening and how their product could fit or win in the markets here. And then I think sort of, that's sort of often the opening piece that we will help companies with. And then we we often try to help shape what that product might look like. So if you have a product that's been particularly successful in your home market, does it need to change in order to be successful in Australia? How do consumers think about, whether it's a residential energy storage or an EV charger here compared to perhaps in the US, for example? So yeah, it's sort of all about, our vision is pretty much our mission is to help accelerate the transition by creating more competition, because we're bringing some of the best products in the world here. Yeah.
Okay. So state of charge is nothing to do with then EV charging per se. It is a state where everything is. No? That's what
So we pretty much, you could say that we probably spend about half of our time on things to do with EV charging, and sort of consulting in that space, and about half of our time in the energy storage space. So our world is very much about, as our company name suggests, about sort of about batteries and the way in which they have an influence on the energy transition, for sure. Yeah. So, and I think the thing that probably makes it a bit different too, in terms of we almost avoid using the word consulting, not because it's a bad word, but I think it's we really want to. One of the things we pride ourselves on is sort of only wanting to work with companies that we really align with. We had this. This was maybe 6 months ago, because we've been around for maybe about 18 months or so now. So we're a pretty new company. And then all of a sudden, about 6 months ago, we started talking to this company from Europe, that's sort of in the EV charging space. And they make this electric vehicle charger that's just, they've completely rethought the way an EV charger should work, both from an installer point of view, how easy it is to install, from a consumer point of view, and the way you sort of interact with this fairly boring machine. But what really struck us about when we started talking to them, because we were interested in the tech from the beginning, that was like, okay, this is a really interesting company. We really should work at bringing them to Australia, because they're going to take some really good market share here, and we want to make, we want to see them succeed. But what struck us was the conversation we had with them. The first 15 minutes, they talked about the way in which just how important it is to have good relationships, how important it is to value the people you work with. And I think, for example, they changed the name of the instead of being a CEO, they sort of have I think it's a chief empathy officer and sort of a chief of love kind of thing. It all sounds pretty hippie, but I think the point that they were making was sort of just how important it is to work with people that you enjoy engaging with, people that you can, that you feel you can trust. So I think for us, we really from then started going to a place where maybe when we met a new company, we went, do we like these people? Do we want to, it's not so much the product or the technology first, but it's more, is this a person that we want to work with? Do we think it's going to be a fun and a good experience? Are we going to have a work relationship that's, give and take and not just say, because quite often in the consulting world, you can come across clients that just sort of grind you down and sort of micromanages you and wants to get the maximum number of hours kind of with you. And I think it's really important in these sort of advisory roles to work with people that you truly sort of align with and that you want to see succeed in the world. Because if you want to see them succeed, you're going to do your best to help them get there, I think.
So how large is your team now? You said you started 18 months. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I started 18 months. It's just 4 of us. We're still the four founders of the business. And we sort of have 2 of us that work full time. The other 2 come in and out depending on projects. Then we have a number of relationships with other sort of single consultants and that kind of stuff, where if we do a bigger project, we might loop in someone from an external kind of company to help out. But we haven't sort of been we're not sort of in this, for growth, and just how do we double every 12 months kind of thing. I think for us it's about creating something that's sustainable, that's fun, that sort of can package our sort of I guess our experiences in this space and make it into something that others can see value in. But I think the other thing, except for I guess just the sort of thing about relationships and working with the right people, we've also decided to only spend 75% of our time on doing consulting projects, and then the other 25, which is a day or two per week, on creating new ventures, which is really interesting, because it's in the position we're in means that we get to see a lot of interesting technology all over the world. We also get to engage with a lot of interesting people with good ideas. Some of those companies might go, we're not going to go to Australia. We might sometimes see, well, there's something here about this kind of product we're offering. And then there's this other company that we engage with. Actually, Australia could see some sort of fusion between the two that could really succeed in helping, say, customers self-consume more solar, for example. Is there anything we can do to help sort of fill that gap? Is there a new product that's needed? Is there a new online platform, whatever it might be? We just allow ourselves to have that 25% of our time to start new things, because that's probably where we're going to see growth, is that seeing a completely new business opportunity where our experience or our partners or whomever can help fill that gap, and sort of launch a new business off the back of it. So that's sort of our plan on how we do growth. And we've just about to launch our first sort of new venture, which sort of sits alongside State of Charge, which is called Electrify My Home, which is all about helping consumers and to electrify their homes, essentially, as the name suggests.
The home batteries, the whole space of home batteries. Very interesting, because you are in the sort of juxtaposition of all those things happening. Then the sort of political alignment is there, and things are going to happen. Because Australians are early adopters. But what is the state of play right now in terms of charging? If somebody walks into Melbourne suddenly say, okay, where is the stage? Can you explain a bit, like how many electric cars are there, chargers and everything,
Sure.
how many players and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess if we look at the EV space in general, last year, 2021, saw a pretty good rise, about a tripling in the number of electric vehicles sold. We sort of went from about 7,000 vehicles to about a bit over 20,000 vehicles, which is great. That was sort of, less than 1% to now around 2% electric vehicle adoption out of the total, which is actually a pretty poor form compared to the rest of the world. I think the world average now is about 9%. So 2%, not great. I think this year we're on track for maybe about 3% at the end of the year, the way that the things are going. It's probably a combination of chip shortages and other supply chain issues, but and to do with our EV policy. But I think Australia really is we're in a position to I think really have a high growth curve on EV adoption. As you'd remember back in the solar PV days, it was actually pretty slow in the beginning.
Shoot up, yeah.
But then all of a sudden we overtook the world, and now we completely dominate solar PV adoption, which is great. And I think we would expect Australia to do something similar in the EV space. It might be a year or two before some of those global issues are resolved, but we're absolutely getting there. I think in terms of on the charging side of things, it's we have a number of charging networks in Australia that are fairly well developed. which is good. There's been some complaints of it's hard to get a charger, or there's sometimes chargers are out of order, that kind of thing. But to be frank, if we look at and that might be if you're traveling for Easter or one of the really congested periods as an EV owner, you might find that. But I think 95% of the time you're going to have a pretty good experience traveling interstate and between the sort of main metropolitan areas. There's a lot of regional EV charging coming online over the next couple of years. So Victoria is going to see I think about 50 sort of fast charging locations being added in the regional parts of the country, which is great, because I think it's that has been part of the issues, is sort of there's been a lot of destination charging, which is great, but you don't always have the time to stop for 5 hours to charge your car. So I think fast charging in regional areas is certainly important. And yeah, a lot of the state governments are starting to, I think, take ownership of the fact that EV infrastructure is needed, and so putting a fair bit of money into it. In particular, I would say, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland's been pretty good too, and South Australia. So it's we're starting to get a bit of coverage there, which is good.
So, I mean, how does it work? Do we have a general interest rate? I understand some of the Tesla chargers are still free, the high voltage DC chargers, the fast chargers. Can you get a membership on, and then you can travel all over the states and just swipe and get charged? Or are the EV charging companies talking to each other? What's the state of play there?
So there's essentially, there's two main commercial networks outside of Tesla. There's ChargeFox and there's EV Networks. That'd be the two biggest ones. They've been fairly well supported by federal government initiatives to build out. And for both of those, they've got sort of like an app-based kind of experience. You need to have their specific app, and you would charge your car via the app and then pay per kilowatt hour. We haven't really started seeing the more subscription-based, for example, charging that you're starting to see over in Europe, which I think is more the all-you-can-eat kind of concept, where you pay a fixed fee per month and you can charge whatever you like. Although quite a few of them are starting to have more and more relationships with the vehicle OEMs, the car manufacturers. So we're starting to see, if you get I think it's, for an example, if you get I don't want to get the name wrong, but it might be, if you get a Porsche, you get 3 years free EV charging with ChargeFox, I believe it is. Similarly with, I think it's Mercedes, and another couple of brands are starting to sort of bundle in the charging service in the vehicle purchase, which I think is really good for the sort of peace of mind of the consumer. You don't have to worry about any expenses over the next few years, except for, of course, charging that you do at home.
Because I saw, I forgot, was it Energy Australia in Sydney? They got into the electric car leasing company, so whereby they are saying pay a flat monthly fee or something, will bundle in car and of course charging and all that as well. So there must be someone doing that in Melbourne, no? Or
yeah, I think from memory, I think that might be AGL doing that.
Yeah, maybe AGL. Yes,
yeah.
yes, AGL.
Yes. So they're definitely going hard, both in the commercial space, but also in that resi space, where you can get like pay a weekly fee and you get a Tesla Model 3 kind of thing. So definitely a lot of interest in that area. And I think the fleet space is sort of starting to really blow up too. That's obviously where a big chunk of all the vehicles sold in Australia are coming from. So both AGL and Origin Energy have a big focus on commercial fleets and making it easy for corporates to do leases and get access to cars through those channels, and also to get the charging solutions that they might need for their corporate offices or whatever it might be too. So yeah, I think fleets is a big one, and yeah, the big guys are putting a lot of effort and spending into sort of being a preferred kind of provider in that space.
Yeah, because this is almost a zero marginal cost world that we are slowly getting there. So if your charging megawatt hour is backed up by a solar station somewhere and you put into, so you are on a zero marginal cost. So definitely makes sense to charge it that way. And suddenly if you bundle in free charging, electric vehicle becomes super profitable in that sense, because people still think, otherwise I pay this much for the car and this much for a gasoline car. Why I want to pay the extra? But if they look at saying, oh, it's a flat fee, I don't have to pay the $50 a week or $100 a week I spend on gasoline. No.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it just completely changes the equation, doesn't it? And I think both, a lot of people are talking about bi-directional charging and vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, which is all super exciting. And I think it's going to fundamentally change the game. But likewise, I think your smart charging in general, imagine the ability to be able to charge a car based on, the local renewable energy being produced, or based on price signals, all in real time. I think that's the kind of stuff that I'm super excited about. We're working on a couple of projects at the moment in that space, and I think that's going to fundamentally, almost achieve the same kind of outcome as bi-directional charging in a way, because it's all about using energy when it's free or even negative, and then it's being used in the car in terms of the benefit from it. So yeah, I think if we look at the market today for different types of EV chargers, they're all fairly dumb. Like they've like if you get a home charge for an EV, typically it's charge or don't charge. Maybe you can set a time of use window and you can charge particular times, but the charges that are starting to come out now, you can easily aggregate and have as part of a virtual power plant program. You can align that then with wholesale energy prices, or if it's with your local solar production. So there's pretty exciting prospects in that space where it essentially becomes like a controllable battery in a sense, which is super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason someone sitting at a coffee shop and saying, "Oh, okay, Victorian wholesale electricity market price is going negative. Oh, okay, I've got a 100 kilowatt hour battery sitting on my basement. Okay, buy, just load it up, right?"
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and then just dump it in, because your fridge, the base of the fridge could be a nice 10 kilowatt hour battery, because I see a lot of appliances coming into the market in the next few years with built-in batteries, so that this notion we have of the evening peak slowly goes away, or the daytime peak. Because in Victoria right now, in the last few summers, off-peak have been in the middle of the day, no, when all the solar gets pumped in, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I've been on wholesale electricity pricing here at home for a while, and it's amazing when you got a close eye on what's happening, that it's that curve of the price in the market has changed incredibly over the last decade in particular. It's we have some very simple ways of managing energy in our home, but we do, for example, have just a system of it automatically turns off the air conditioning system when we reach a particular wholesale price, and I think it's
okay, good.
Yeah, and it's very very simple, but it's just a matter of protecting some of that cost, and obviously that will if 1 million homes did that, there's obviously a big impact on the network and the grid as a whole.
It's funny what you're just saying. I mean, not funny. It's quite. I'm just groping for words. When the original market was designed, I actually, part of the Melbourne Business School MBA, I did a simulation of wholesale electricity market and how it will impact individual households. And people said, no, tip the households. Household will never have the ability to flick this exactly what you're doing, right? Unthinkable that and now it's happening at the individual customer level, saying, hey, my threshold is $50 a megawatt. If the price goes up, switch off my aircon and or switch into battery or sell all the storage electricity I have when it crosses $100 megawatt hour.
And it's interesting.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting how we've sort of gone from, maybe 15 years ago or so, starting to put in, time of use based tariffs. And, we all sort of expected, well, surely consumers are going to respond to price signals, thinking about them as objects in economics, essentially. But then in reality, the uptake of time of use tariffs was tiny. I can't remember the number, if it was 3%, 7%. It was fairly low single digit numbers. And so I agree with that original assertion you had back then, that surely customers aren't going to do things to respond to these things. And I think the only way you can get people to respond is to take care of it for them, because they're not going to, it'll be very hard, except for, energy nerds like us, we will engage with the wholesale market if we have the signal, because we're interested in the dynamics of it all. But a normal consumer, they're not going to do that. So I think it's about then, building a product or building a service where that's just one of the features that's included. The consumer might know that, that's the kind of thing that will happen in the background, as long as it doesn't impact their lives, I think.
But how do you see, sorry, it's a little different question. How do you see the digital divide come into this? Because you just mentioned people like you and I who understand, obviously, a bit way more than the average person is. Now, are they being left behind, or the technology, AI, will help them to come into this space? What's your vision on that?
Yeah, I think I would hope, and I think that the way in which these kind of energy products, whether that's, say, the way in which a battery interacts with the market, that the products are hopefully going to be designed in a way that makes it simpler, and you don't think about it, and that you don't have to think about it. But I do think, we'll probably have maybe not a digital divide, but I think a divide in terms of, people that can afford and can't afford these kind of products, because, it's easy for, perhaps me to become energy independent because, I can afford a battery, or I can afford a solar PV system and all those things. But it's definitely, I think it's very important for whether state governments or federal governments to make sure that it's a transition that's equitable across society, and that we all can have access to, this kind of technology, which is going to be absolutely key to, for the energy transition for our homes, for our economies, because the technology and is going to be needed to facilitate the transition, but we're not all going to be able to afford it. So we need to make sure that we I think, think about the policies to support, the whole of society to go through the transition together.
Yeah, because there's no reason why all homes can't have a forced requirement that, okay, you must have a 10 kilowatt or 20 kilowatt hour battery built into the house, and a new permissions that the council gives, right? I think many places in the world is actually thinking of, I think some may have already done, no? And that's what you're saying. That then brings everyone along.
Yeah, and I think too that it's probably, and that's great, and it's absolutely the way it should be, that we have to start mandating, perhaps having less or no gas connections, that we should, have solar on the roof where it's possible, have energy storage, perhaps have EV charging as standard, those kind of things that are built into new homes. But I think too, for, how do we make sure that we not just, transition slowly as we build new stock of housing, but also take care of the existing housing that we have, because most houses are going to be around for quite a long time. So how do we support retrofit upgrades for whether it's heating and cooling systems? I think, heat pumps is becoming a really, almost like a living room conversation nowadays, because it's such a groundbreaking technology that's really making it so much cheaper to heat or cool your home, and I think. But it can be quite expensive in certain parts of the world to install efficient heat pumps, and so how do you make sure that you have policies to support that across the world?
It's like a roadworthy test you do for a car, right? Suddenly
Yeah,
the standard gone up, you have to fit it, and then how do you make it? Oh, this is fantastic. Now, all these ideas you have and all those things that you have learned, when are you going to bring it to internationally, or you want to focus in Australia, and what is technology out there that I can bring to Australia? Or you also want to part of your business to say, okay, how can we help the governments of the world or countries of the world? Have you thought about that space?
Yeah, I mean, I think the as much as we would love world domination, I actually
like
think
that word. I like that word. Yes.
I do think that I remember when I first moved here back in 2008, I think it was, it struck me as, 2050 is essentially going to be the year when I retire. Australia has a lot of well, we have a so-called net zero goal by 2050. We absolutely need to make a huge dent in our emissions. I think we're still rising, despite what the government might want to say with some accounting. But there's so much work doing in little Australia by itself, that I think our focus and attention is going to be, how do we make sure that we can distill some of that best technology that's coming from different parts of the world, to get it here as quick as possible, because we really are on the back foot in some ways, and we definitely think that technology and competition is going to be a big part of helping to accelerate it for Australia, and I think there'll be plenty of opportunity for us to grow and make a big impact here. If we grow to a point where we feel we've exhausted our opportunity here, then hopefully we can start that world domination and go to other places. But I think the focus really is to help Australia and locally bring some of those game-changing technologies to the energy transition.
Fantastic. Yeah, because I like that vision. And also you mentioned retirement, 2050. I'm actually retiring in a few weeks' time. That's the plan.
That's awesome.
Rather than staying longer. So I'll be in Melbourne in, I think next month. So I'll look you up.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it'd be great to catch up for a coffee in person.
So much can be done. So much can be done, and so little has happened. Now, as a new startup, what do you tell a company or a bunch of people who wants to get into this space? Because you have all the boxes ticked. You have a solar, you have a batteries, you have electric vehicle charging. These are the things people really want to get in. And where do they start? What's your message for a new set of entrepreneurs who wants to get into the space? What should they do? I mean, what have you learned?
Yeah, good question. I think, I think fundamentally it's sort of about what's the problem you're solving, to be really clear on that before anything else. I think in our case, the space that COVID gave us to start really thinking about where we can make a difference, is, it gave us a day a week, because we're sort of we're just working 80% for about a year in our respective roles. So we actually met up every Friday for maybe about 9 months or so, talking about, okay, what's the different things that are happening in energy, but where do we think we can actually help solve a problem? And we sort of all had experiences in working perhaps with companies from overseas coming into Australia, testing, entering the market. And then we started going, well, there's not a lot of people helping to make that easier, or helping to remove the risk of going into a new market. So in our case, it was about just clearly defining where we're different, So we don't really, go and dabble in, even though we perhaps could dabble in things like, be a part of, say, developing new renewable energy projects, or maybe being a part of helping to think about how a microgrid is structured. We try to leave that to others that have a, specific experience and expertise in that. And for us, we try to just grow our experience in helping companies understand the Australian market opportunity and where the hurdles are, and then help them get in faster, get in with less risk, and from that we think we can create a lot better outcomes.
Because I think that defining the boundaries are very important, what you are not there to do and also what you're trying to do. That slowly, that demarcation line appears, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the old thing of, doing an MVP for whatever you want to test, as I mentioned before, with this sort of Electrify My Home initiative, which is about everything from appliances through to EV charging and batteries for homes. For that, we haven't actually gone to market yet, but we built an MVP, which we shared with, I think, about 200 friends and people in our networks, and asked them, hey, what do you think about this? Scored, a bunch of different dimensions of what that online platform looks like, and then shape it. So spend as little time as possible building a prototype, particularly if you're in the sort of tech space, test it out, get some honest feedback. If it doesn't work, just be prepared to let it go and have a crack at something else. But I think defining the problem, and I think having a crack and just being open to feedback, I think is really important.
I'm very happy to see that this is. I didn't appreciate this is another COVID baby that you are sitting on. I mean, my podcast is as one as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, it's good therapy, isn't it, to sort of do things that you're either passionate about or where you've got a good experience in.
Yeah, this all came from all the travel time we saved, no?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So what's your vision about autonomous car? Because autonomous car is going to free up from those, the commuting, those who have to do, right? Then you suddenly you have free time, no?
Yeah, I mean it's a big question, actually, which it's actually really hard to. I've got a better understanding now of what that future might look like. We've had electric cars for the last 3 or 4 years. We used to have a Hyundai, and now we have a Tesla. And I think but even though it's just full self-driving, when you let the car do the sort of keep it in the lane and that kind of stuff, it's all fairly simple. But I think you can still, at least in my case, I feel I have confidence in the way in which the car takes over the world, in particular on sort of highway driving, and that, like in our case, if I'm traveling a couple of hours regionally where my fiance's parents live, I can now actually look around and experience the landscape in a different way, because I know the car is going to do 80% of the work for me, and I can sort of just take it all in a different way. It's still hard, though, I think, to sort of comprehend what's it going to be like when 100% of the driving is done for you. Maybe there's not even a steering wheel in the car in 15 years from now. It would be really interesting to see what it is that we do with our time, if we become more productive and we do more podcasts and new businesses, or if we do more scrolling of the Instagram feed. I'm not sure. It's a very interesting world. Time will only tell. Now, is there anything else that I could have asked you? I mean, this has been a very, very good learning session for me. I learned a lot from you. Yeah, thanks. No, I think it is a super exciting time to be in the energy space. As you know, from having worked here in Victoria, it's been, even say 15 years ago when I sort of started in this space, it used to be a lot harder to do new things and test out stuff or, launch new products. It really feels like in the last 5 years that now we're, the pace at which change is happening, in particular, with sort of, new innovation, but also in sort of clean energy, is pretty amazing. So it's just fun to be part of the ride, I think. I'm looking forward to seeing how we can scale State of Charge in the future, how we can scale Electrify My Home as another business, but then, help solve other problems along the way, because, clearly there's going to be plenty of work for all of us to figure out how to make this transition as orderly and clean as possible.
Again, thank you very much for your time, and I hope many of my listeners of this podcast will find it very interesting, and people might come here and connect with you and get guidance. How does people find you?
Yeah, they can either find us on stateofcharge.com.au, or on LinkedIn, State of Charge. Just look us up there. That's probably the easiest way, I would imagine. And yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone that's, either thinking about Australia, and sort of bringing in their product or service here, or maybe they have a specific technical problem that they need to solve, or even if they're, say, a retailer in Australia, because a lot of the times, for example, the more slower moving beasts like utilities or the energy retailers, we often find that the new innovative companies that we're talking to, might need a customer, and they might need a new innovative technology. So we often quite find that to be a bridge as well. But anyway, they can find State of Charge just on stateofcharge.com.au.
Okay, so I want to talk to you maybe in 6 months' time and saying how State of Charge charged up a lot of new mines and dumb assets and everything else together, charging towards the 2050. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Great to meet you, and hoping to catch you in person at some stage as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our show. Also, leave your comments and review if you enjoyed today's episode. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at @shasni for updates. That's SHASNIE. Once again, this has been Energypreneurs, connecting you to the innovative opportunities in solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles. Stay tuned.